Geek to me radio, da 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 da. Geek to me radio, da 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 da. Welcome, geeks and nerds, girls and boys, to another all-new edition of Geek to Me Radio. Today we will be talking movies with Bret Hoffman, the social media director for Marcus Theatres. We'll also be talking about a brand new comic, 1000 Nightmares, authored by Bil Richardson. Then we get into a brand new book about movie villains, Born to be Bad, from Ty Singh. All that and more. Stand by. We're talking TV, comics and movies, and video games. And if you don't know Star Trek and Star Wars, we'll try to explain. There are 12 doctors for Hogwarts houses, one ring rules them all. To be the greatest Pokemon master, you must catch them all. You must catch them all. Try to catch them all. Gotta catch them all. Gotta catch them all. We have a jammed packed show today. I want to start it off by thanking our premier sponsor, the City of St. Charles, historic St. Charles. Check out the website, discoverstcharles.com. All sorts of things to see and do. We are in October. Legends and Lanterns, their big Halloween festival, is coming up the last 2 weekends of the month. You can get details about that event at their website, discoverstcharles.com. If you're a foodie, if you're a historian, if you like unique shopping experiences, if you're out of town, want to come find some nice place to stay, City of St. Charles has you covered from all those aspects. Great day today. We're entering that fall season where you can get out there, take your dog for a walk. If your cat's that kind of cat, take your cat for a walk. All up and down the Katy Trail in Frontier Park. Tons to see, tons to do, fun for the whole family. Check out the website. Plan your trip. Discover stcharles.com. Very proud to have them as our premier sponsor. Been with us since the beginning. So thank you to the CVB, Joe Ward, and Elizabeth Phelps in the City of St. Charles. Speaking of our sponsors, we are joined right now by Bret Hoffman, the social media guru for Marcus Theatres, handles all their marketing, and no one knows more about movies than this guy. And Bret, thank you very much for joining us on air.
Thanks, James. Happy to be here.
So we have a lot of movies that are coming out, and some new releases to look forward to. But you have one-upped me. You ended up seeing Venom. I did not get to see it yet. The reviews from the critics have not been favorable, but it's on track to make some decent money. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you said what I was thinking about. The movie has brought in $80 million this weekend. It's the highest grossing film in the history of October in terms of opening weekends. The critics have given it a 32% rating of Rotten Tomatoes, but the audience has given it 89%, and I'm on the audience side with this one. I think it's a great film that gains a lot of momentum during the actual viewing process, and I think that's why you see a little bit of a distinction between what the critics are saying about this and what the audience is saying about this movie. If you're looking at it from a critic's perspective, it probably has some of the issues that go on with a lot of origin movies, and that's that the setup is a bit sloppy, and you could probably label some of the things in the setup as being even unnecessary. But as I said, as the movie goes on, it just gains some more momentum and plays to its strengths, and I think this is just a nonstop action thrill ride in terms of pretty much about midway through on, and man, James, I'm looking forward to seeing perhaps a second and third installment for this one. I know Tom Hardy signed on for two more of these things if they decide to make them. And frankly, I can't see Sony not doing two more after they opened up with $80 million on this one. So I guess for all the audience members out there listening, if you're thinking about going to see Venom but see the critics' reviews, I would pretty much tell people to ignore them. Here's the idea. It's hard for them to get into and talk about this Todd McFarlane and Marvel character that has so much to it, and it's a complex character. This character isn't one that's either good or bad. There's a lot of complexities to that, and I think that's why the movie is a little bit hard to describe. I read a couple of critics' reviews that talked about saying, is it a horror movie? Is it an action movie? Is it a drama? Is it a comedy? And the answer is it's hard to tell because that Venom character is a little bit tough and he changes as the movie goes by. But I'm giving this one my thumbs up rating. It's definitely one that I think will have legs, and definitely one I think Marvel's going to invest in the next couple of years.
It's very interesting because I think the stats you gave, both the critics and the Rotten Tomatoes ratings seem higher than Batman versus Superman was for its opening weekend. So I guess that's good as far as that goes because there's still a lot of divisiveness over that film. But Venom, for comic book fans, I've heard some comic book fans I've seen on Twitter might not like it if you're a comic book purist. But a lot of the reaction has still been, as you said, positive from just the general audience. So, if Tom Hardy's on to make more and this one makes money, like you said, I'm sure we'll see a Venom 2, Revenge of the Symbiote.
Yeah, I'd like to see what they do with this one and how they weave that character. I'm also interested to see how they weave him in the other parts of the Marvel Universe. Right now, they've kind of got him set aside. Of course, he's always been associated with Spider-Man. So we'll see how they weave it in with other characters and bring it into perhaps other universes as well. But this is one where I say, don't knock it unless you try it type of thing. Go out and see this movie. I really enjoyed it. Grab your popcorn. And while it's a different type of film, this reminded me of something similar to what I would say about Ant-Man in its space in the Marvel Universe, in that this is a really fun standalone movie. It has legs on its own, and then it also has the ability to be basically batched into other parts of the storyline as well. But I think Tom Hardy's going to be back on this one. I tell everyone, go out and see this movie. Have a great time. Like I said, maybe the first half an hour is going to be a little bit bogged down with them describing how exactly this being from outer space came down, what their motivations are, and things like that. But I think once you get through that, great popcorn film and a great film for them to introduce by Sony.
And another one that you and I both saw was First Man, which should be out in theaters Venom's second weekend. And from what you and I briefly talked off air, we both enjoyed First Man.
Yeah, it's a really, really great movie. This is one you really need to see in the theaters. And it's going to give Venom a run for its money next weekend. For those that don't know, Ryan Gosling plays Neil Armstrong. The movie is directed by Damien Chazelle, and it's all about Apollo 11 and us getting a first person to the moon, and Neil Armstrong being the first man who landed on the moon. You and I were talking about this. The job they did recreating the scenery and recreating the sets and just recreating everything down to the hairstyles of these individuals seemed to be spot on, which I'm sure is going to get them some nominations, because I think you were commenting that as well, correct?
Yeah, no, I thought as from if you look at it just as a period piece, because there's not a lot of action for people going in, it's not really focused on the mission and the crew like Apollo 13 was. This centers on Neil Armstrong quite firmly. It's parts of it I would even describe as a little slow, but they get into such technical detail. And when they're in that first mission, when they're trying to dock with the Aegina and then they have to disengage, you feel like you're right there. It was well done. Like I said, from a period piece, the haircuts, the clothes, the music, the cars, everything was spot on. I loved it just from that aspect, the detail in it.
Yeah, I would say that for people. I would say this is not another, quote, like Apollo 13 movie directed by Ron Howard. It is a different type of movie, but I think it's great because of that. And I would tell anyone, if you're going to go see this movie, I'm to tell you, go see it in a great auditorium. At Marcus Theaters, I'm really going to recommend you go out to see it on our either Ultra Screen DLX at Chesterfield Cinema,
yeah,
or our newly reopened Ronnie's IMAX auditorium, because when you see this movie with the correct sound, with the correct experience, and with the really big screen, you are going to feel like you are in that capsule with Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins. You're really going to feel it. This is a movie that was meant to be seen that way. And at Chesterfield, it's got Dolby Atmos immersive sound. It's got laser projection, and it's got the largest screen in St. Louis. And then the Ronnie's IMAX just reopened with new seating. And it, of course, has all the hallmarks that IMAX has been known for. Go see it on one of these two. I can tell you, I saw it in a similar auditorium. There were some scenes that were had me on the edge of my seat and just made me feel as if I was with them going through these things, because as people do know, getting up there was very dangerous. Our space program was a very risky maneuver, and this chronicled how, I mean, we didn't have the computing power in those ships that we have in our own pockets today.
Exactly.
I think that comes out when you're watching this movie.
And my wife didn't get to go to the screening with me, but we did screen this at the Des Cinema, which is absolutely beautiful. If you've not been to the Des Marcus Theater yet, go check that out. But yeah, I'm going to have to take my wife to see it. And now that the Ronnie's IMAX auditorium is reopened, that's where I'll be taking her to see that. We're going to hit a quick break. Brett, you're okay to stick with us for another segment, yes?
Yeah, I'll be right on board.
Perfect. We're going to come back. We're also going to discuss Bad Times at the El Royale. Then Brett will give us a rundown on some upcoming movies you might find interesting. All that and more. Stand by.
Hi, everybody. This is Maria Canals Barrera. I voice Talk Girl on the Justice League, and you're listening to Geek to Me Radio.
We are back. Talking with Bret Hoffman, the man from all the marketing and social media goodness at Marcus Theaters. We also, Brett, you and I both saw Bad Times at the El Royale. It wasn't what I expected going into it. The trailers made it out to be a little bit different than I actually felt it was, but I still ended up leaving the movie really enjoying it.
Yeah, I thought so too. Another movie that takes place actually around the era of First Man. This one takes place a little into the 70s. For those who don't know what it's about 7 strangers who each have their own secrets who meet at this hotel in Lake Tahoe, and all of their stories kind of come together at once. Really interesting in that the director and writer is Drew Goddard, who has done a lot of different things, but he has written things like he's written episodes of Lost, episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He's done the screenplay for World War Z. I mean, his talent really comes out in this one, and the fact that he has really rich storylines, and I think he really thought through some of the backgrounds from all the players that are in this movie. And, James, I would say, if anything, the movie had a flaw was that even at 2 minutes and 21 seconds, 2 hours and 21 minutes, I actually wanted more. I actually wanted more of the backstory about the hotel and all of the characters. So it actually left me more in this mystery thriller, but very stylized and very unique. I think people will kind of compare this to some of Tarantino's work. You and I were talking earlier, and I think it was spot on. We talked about the movie 4 Rooms.
Yes.
Directed by 4 different directors. It has all kinds of different characters and things like that. It's a movie like that. And really kind of neat how they set everything up to then climax towards the end. But yeah, a little different than I was expecting as well. And my only thing is I was yearning for more about the story. I don't know. Is that what you kind of thought?
Yeah, there were parts when I was kind of like, what's happening? I felt like there were a couple strings they showed us but never really pulled on. I feel like the previews had the whole setup where this hotel is literally half in Nevada, half in California, and they kind of play that up in the beginning of the movie as well, but they never revisit it. It's never a plot point that people come back to and it's like, oh, this is because, so it's just kind of like, yes, this is cool. And we're moving on, which was, I thought it would factor back in somewhere. But yeah, the cast was brilliant. We've got Dakota Fanning, Chris Hemsworth, John Hamm, and obviously we've got the Big Lebowski himself, Jeff Bridges is in it. So great cast. And I like I said, 4 rooms, a little bit of 10 Little Indians because they had this group of strangers coming together vibe. You don't know what's going on. But overall, while it had its oddities, I can't really say I didn't like the movie. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
No, I tell people go out and see it. And if you're like me, you're kind of writing the rest of the movie yourself at home, where I'm kind of, writing my own screenplay for the rest of that movie and what went on the Nevada side, the California side. So a lot of good stuff to keep you guessing and keep you thinking about. Yeah,
it's definitely one they could probably do a prequel to, if anything else, depending on how well it goes. And maybe you and I can write to Drew Goddard and give him our ideas and see if he'll give us writing credit on the prequel.
Perhaps, yeah.
But we've got a lot of movies coming up, too, to look forward to here. Halloween is going to be huge, I think, with Jamie Lee Curtis coming back. Final confrontation with Michael Myers.
Yeah, this movie is probably going to be, compared to what we saw here with Venom, probably the second highest opening gross of a weekend in October. I mean, this one's, I kind of thought about this, and if you're going to see one horror movie this Halloween season, go out and see this one. And I think it's just going to do great because it's going to attract the young people. It's going to attract the older people who just love the decades of nostalgia paying off on this one. And having Jamie Lee Curtis in this movie is just such a win for everyone. So this is the Halloween movie to see. I'm predicting that, and definitely has a lot of anticipation going forward with it.
And we talked about First Man. This is the year of biopics, evidently, because we've also got Bohemian Rhapsody. We've got an Elton John movie coming out, too. But Bohemian Rhapsody looks very, very interesting.
Yeah, Bohemian Rhapsody, portrayal of Freddie Mercury by Rami Malek. Man, does this thing look spot on. This looks like another good movie. It is clocking in at well over 2 hours, and there's a lot of great content in here. It's a movie that's going to have some great awards potential as well. And what's great about this is, again, a lot of people are going to see it, all the way from Gen Xers to baby boomers who maybe actually listened to Queen and maybe even saw them live in concert. You'll get people who only know Queen through Wayne's World.
That's right.
People singing karaoke to Bohemian Rhapsody. But, man, this is a good one. Another one to look up. If you appreciate movies and really appreciate watching these artistic expressions on screen, this one's going to be a good one.
And I don't want to get too far ahead because I want to have you back on air either the end of this month or first part of next, closer to it, so we can talk more in depth about these movies. But we got a couple of the ones coming up. Overlord, obviously The Crimes of Grindelwald, the second Fantastic Beast movie. Ralph Breaks the Internet, which is very, very the buzz on that one is insane. Do you have another one besides these? You're thinking that it's going to be the big hit for winter, or is it one of those three?
Well, actually, I think Ralph Breaks the Internet is going to do very, very well. I think Mary Poppins is actually going to be the movie of the holiday season coming up. But also, I want to take a look at Aquaman, because I think Aquaman has really given Warner Brothers a chance here. Alita, Battle Angel, has been moved to go in a Valentine's Day slot instead of being released this Christmas, which means that the field is open up for Warner Brothers. So they can really deliver here with a great Aquaman picture, and if they do, it's going to pay off at the box office. So with a little bit less crowded slate, let's see how Warner Brothers does. I mean, a lot of us have looked at some of these picks in this universe, films in this universe, as not being to the caliber we expected, except for Wonder Woman. But they've really got a chance here to show us what they're made of with Aquaman. And I'm really looking forward to see what they do with that one. And
coming from the perspective of a comic book fan, they just had that last preview that came out of him in the classic orange and green outfit. Black Manta looks straight out of the comic books. And I'm sad to see that the people who label themselves as DC fans when they're really Zack Snyder fans are now threatening to not go see Aquaman because of, he's in the classic thing. He's destroying Zack Snyder's vision for what was. Don't let that stuff get in your way. If you've been with these DC movies, if you've been with Batman versus Superman, Man of Steel, Wonder Woman, Justice League, go out and see Aquaman. Give it a chance before you just totally just disregard it because of who's writing or directing it. James Wan is brilliant. I think he's paid a lot of attention to the detail of the history of this character. Jason Momoa is the biggest Aquaman fan out there at this point. He's immersed himself in the character quite literally. So I'm really hoping that this one does well for Warner Brothers. I would like to see them get a big win out of this.
Yeah, I would like them too. If not for the fact that we've all kidded around about the fact that Aquaman may never get his own movie, he's finally getting one. So let's go watch it and let's give it a chance to have a great ride.
Exactly. And, of course, if you're going to see it, they need to see it at a Marcus Theater. I'm just going to throw that out there. I know you're kind of too modest to say it, but I'll go ahead and say it because I'm very excited. That's another one that's probably – I'm assuming there'll be 3D showings of that, so that one I'm going to have to go see in 3D and probably in IMAX too. I went and saw Force Awakens 6 different times so I could get the IMAX and the 3D experience. That's probably Aquaman. I'll have to do the same thing.
Yeah, check us out. Sign up for our Magical Movie Awards loyalty program. We will toss you emails and give you communications about when all these things get on sale so you can get your tickets first. And like I said, all these blockbuster movies, I'd recommend seeing it at any one of our theaters or definitely for Aquaman, First Man. These other movies that you really have to see on the big screen, that Chesterfield Ultra Screen DLX or that Ronnie's IMAX are great places to see it. And everything is at marcustheaters.com. So, well, you're getting me excited, and I'm excited. And as everyone out there listening can know, there's a lot of good movies coming out. So stay tuned for what's coming on the big screen.
There definitely are. And like I said, we'll have you back on either later this month or the very first part of November to talk more movies. Bret Hoffman, thank you so much for your time. I love talking to you.
Great. Have a great afternoon. Thanks.
You too. There he goes. You can check them out. Follow them on Twitter at Marcus Theaters, by the way. We'll be right back After this, stand by.
Hey, this is Mark Guggenheim, and you are listening to Geek to Me Radio.
We are back. My next guest is an author. You can go to his website, Bil with 1L Richardson.com, to check out his many titles. He's got a new comic book he's working on called 1,000 Nightmares, which I thought would be apropos since we're entering the Halloween season, with a cover by none other than Simon Beasley. We've got Bil Richardson on the line. Thank you for being part of the show today, sir.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, obviously, the cover artist, that's a huge get. We know him from Lobo, a lot of other stuff he's done. But can you talk a little bit about how, when an author is doing a comic book and everything, do you get to cherry pick? Do you reach out, or do artists read it and contact you and be like, oh, I'd love to do a cover for you?
Oh, no, we've got to reach out. And Simon's a guy that, he's really, really busy. And just the fact that he was able to squeeze me in and like the project enough to be able to do a custom cover for it was just tremendous. I'm a huge fan of his. I've got a whole box of his original art that I've collected. So having him do that cover for the initial issue was just huge.
And like I said, 1,000 Nightmares is the title. I think you're up to at least 4 issues now, yeah?
Actually, the 5th issue just came out, so we have 5 issues.
Perfect. So tell people a little bit about the story. What kind of comic can they expect if they go out and purchase this one?
Well, it's horror, and I'm a huge fan of horror, and I am unsatisfied with what I've been reading lately, and I wanted to do a completely new approach. So what I did was I tried to take stories. I tried to start where other stories ended. A lot of stories, you read them, there's not a lot going on. There's a big climax at the end. I try to start with a big climax. My splash pages, my first pages on every story are as good or better than most of the things you're used to reading. And then we ramp it up from there for another big finish. So the stories are beautiful. They're socially relevant. They deal with a lot of social topics. There's a few that deal with, some of the old saws like vampires or werewolves or something like that. But most of them are much more topical. And the stories were actually Comixology refused one of the covers because it was too graphic. They have to have these G-rated previews that they put for the books, and some of the stories they didn't have any G-rated pages. They were all so intense that Comixology couldn't even do a decent preview for them. So there's a lot of stuff to like in here if you're a horror fan.
And so are they standalone, like each issue, like one focuses on, like you said, werewolves, one for vampires, or is it kind of a continuous story? Is there a thread that goes through each one, or can someone just pick up issue 4 and have that be standalone and be right on topic with everything else?
Oh, absolutely. Each issue stands on its own. There are 3 to 5 stories in each one of the issues. These are longer. Most comics are 22 pages long. Each of these are 26, 27 pages of content. The stories range from 2 or 3 pages to 8 or 9 or 10 pages. Each one of them stands on its own. So there's several stories in each issue, and there's not really a theme overall. Each of the stories is sort of its own entity, and tremendous artists from all over the world, and hopefully stories that people will gravitate to.
And as a writer, you don't just focus on horror, though, I take it. You've obviously experimented with other genres and everything. That's just the comic book is the horror element, yes?
Oh, absolutely. I do a lot of humor stuff. I've got 5 books on Amazon right now, and they're everything from current events to humor. And I've done films that are all over the gamut, from action to comedy to just about any genre that you can name. And some of the stories in here are not straight horror. Some of them are very topical and deal with social issues and things like that. But most of them have some teeth in them.
And I mentioned earlier the website. If people want to go check out any of your works, they can go to Bil with 1L Richardson.com to check out the links to all your stories and everything like that. So what else do you have? Is the comic book taking up most of your time, or do you have something else that you have a new project you're working on?
Well, the comics have really occupied my life. It took about 4 years to get those out. But I've got another novel. It's a children's book for ages like 9 to 14 called The Frankenstein Adventures, and it's just been released on Amazon. but it's a crossover book. It's something that adults would enjoy too. It's funny. It's full of action. It will make you laugh and cry. And it's like 99 cents if you do a digital download on that thing. And then I've got another horror book that's coming out in February, probably 4 more books coming out next year. So there's a lot of things in the pipeline.
And again, I guess the website's the best place to go, or if they go to Amazon and just Google your name, what's the best way to get for people to get the majority of your works if they want to go out and check these out for digital download or purchasing the hard copies?
Well, you can go to Amazon. There's several things on Comixology. But if you go to my website, one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do a 100% money-back guarantee. If you buy a book and you don't like it, if you get it on my website, I will give your money back. Amazon and Comixology won't let me do that. But if you go to my site, you can get that. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm so confident people are going to like the stuff that I'm willing to give your money back if you don't.
And it is the Halloween season we're entering, so horror is always loved at this time of year above all others. So Bil Richardson, Bil with 1L, Richardson.com is the website. And how many issues are planned out? Is it just, you said 5's just coming out, or do you have is it a 12 issue? Is it going to be ongoing?
Well, the plan was to do 5 issues and see what the public reaction was to them. And those will be, hopefully someday we'll bring those out into a collection. But for now, I put out 5 issues. I'm going to see what the response is to them, and then we'll decide from there if there's going to be more. I've got lots of more stories to tell and lots of more amazing artists that I would love to introduce the world to.
That's awesome. We'll be looking forward and waiting with bated breath. Bil Richardson, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate having you on.
Hey, I promise folks listening live that if you go online now, if you use the coupon code GEEK1000, you'll get a 20% discount, and that's only for people listening live on your show today, and it ends at midnight tonight Central Time.
Midnight tonight.
GEEK1000.
GEEK1000 on the BillRichardson.com website. Thanks so much. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Love having you.
Thank you. We're going to take our next break. We'll be right back with Ty Singh talking about his book, Born to be Bad. Stand by.
Hi, this is Leslie Ann Brunt. I play Mazikeen on Lucifer, and you're listening to Geek to Me Radio.
We are back. Leslie Ann Brandt, Mazikeen on Lucifer, had a great chance to chat with her at a convention. She was kind enough to give me that liner for the show. That will be coming back for a 4th season. That show, Lucifer, which was on Fox, got dropped, but luckily Netflix picked it up, and it's going to be an original Netflix season 4, so I'm very looking forward to that with all the production aspects that Netflix puts into their shows. And, of course, speaking of villains, my next guest has written a book called Born to be Bad, talking to the greatest villains in action cinema. I want the cover of this book as a poster for my wall because I'm a huge 80s junkie. I love cinema, and this has kind of merged my two worlds together. Our next guest is Ty Singh, author of the book. Thanks very much for joining us on air.
Thank you very much for having me, and I will be probably making that cover into a poster because lots of people have requested it.
That's fantastic. So good. I'll as soon as it goes on sale, I'll be sure to pick one up and have to take something off my wall to make room for that one. But you've got all these great villains. The poster you've got Belloc from Raiders of the Lost Ark. You've got Boba Fett from Empire Strikes Back. What inspired you? Let's start there. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, I grew up with all these iconic action films, and it was actually rewatching RoboCop for the 500th time, and I was just struck by how all the actors in it weren't the typical actors that you would have thought would be hired in a big action film. People like Kurtwood Smith and Paul McCrane, and especially people like Ronnie Cox. They had previously played upstanding police officers or military characters. And so I was just kind of fascinated how actors like this ended up playing bad guys. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought how it might refer to other actors who had played villains in all the action films I grew up watching. So I just sat down and made a list of all the actors who played, the memorable villains from my childhood, and then just set out to track them all down.
And you've got a picture on the cover of Julian Glover as General Veers from Empire. Of course, he also played a villain in Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade. He played a villain in Doctor Who, for crying out loud. Did you get a chance to talk with him, interview him for the book? What all did he have to say?
Yeah, and he was also a Bond villain as well.
That's right.
So he was great. He he actually went to school in the same city I live in, Bristol. So I met him at a comic book convention here in the UK, proposed what I wanted to do, and then we kind of had an interview, and we talked about everything from his now appearances in Game of Thrones to Star Wars, James Bond, Indiana Jones. He even voiced a giant spider in the Harry Potter films. So he has a full range of career. That man has been in everything.
No kidding.
So, yeah, he had some great stories.
And I think he was in 2 episodes of Doctor Who. He was in City of Death with the 4th Doctor. And I believe he, very young, he showed up as a villain for the 1st Doctor as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly. He's been in loads of British dramas and British movies, films like Quatermass and The Pit, which is another film where his face melts, very much like Indiana Jones, when he drinks from the wrong grail. So we were just talking about how he's kind of ended up playing all these, villainous roles through the years. And yeah, he was great. He was a delight to speak to. Actors like that who have kind of come up in the British acting scene, they've just appeared in everything. So they will just talk to you about appearing in The Saint with Roger Moore, all the way through to, being in Croatia for Game of Thrones. It's great.
And another villain you had who we have both met, who was also British and also delightful, was Sarah Douglas, who played Ursa in Superman 2. And she was fantastic. She actually came and visited Metropolis 2 years ago for Superman Days. And she was absolutely fantastic. I remember her mentioning your book then. At that point, I'm like, oh, that looks like a great book. And then you and I start chatting on Twitter, and here you are on the show. So talking to Sarah Douglas, again, that must have been, because she's just such a fantastic person.
Sarah was an absolute delight, and what was amazing was kind of the story she would tell about not essentially her own Me Too movement in kind of the 70s, but the way that many producers in Hollywood kind of wanted her to play up to that leather-clad temptress role, and she was kind of unwilling to compromise on that. She said she had loads of meetings with the producers back in the day that essentially wanted her to be just like Ursa in the Superman films, and she wanted to do something very different. She just didn't want to be typecast in those roles, but eventually she realized that's where the money was going to be, and so she played characters in V, and she's kind of become this sci-fi author, but she was very, very kind of honest in, like, when I was starting out, all these people just kind of wanted me to play the same type of character over and over again. And, eventually I kind of had to, in order to work, say yes. But at the time, she was very determined not to do that. But she was the only woman I managed to interview for the book. I wanted to try and track down actresses like Bridget Nielsen and other kind of iconic female action stars at the time. But many were kind of a little bit reluctant to talk about playing villains, but Sarah, like you said, is so lovely. Me and her talked for hours, and it was great to get her in the book.
And of all the people you interviewed, and there's a bunch of them in the book, I was looking over the names, was there anyone that you were either surprised that you got or disappointed that you weren't able to put in the book?
The first person that said yes was Vernon Wells from Commando and Mad Max 2. And I was overjoyed when he said yes, because he was at the top of my list. And once Vernon was on board, lots of other people came on board. And that man had some great stories about Commando with Arnie, and trying to do as much of his crazy stunts as he could in Mad Max 2, or the Road Warrior, as you call it in the States.
Right.
There were some actors I really did try and get hold of, but their schedules wouldn't permit it. Kurtwood Smith, who I mentioned from RoboCop, that man is always working. I couldn't get him. Clancy Brown, who played the Kurgan in Highlander.
Yeah. When
I was writing the book, he had literally just finished press for the 30th anniversary of Highlander and was just done talking about the film. He was like, no more. Please, God, no more. So I completely understood that. And there were a few other actors. There was one actor who wanted an obscene amount of money for an interview, and unfortunately I had to say no, but I couldn't possibly say who that was.
No problem. We won't twist your arm or get that out of you. We need to take a quick commercial break. Are you okay to stick with us for our last segment?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, we'll be right back talking more about Born to be Bad with Ty Singh right after this. Stand by.
Test your might. Test your might.
This is Tara Strong, also known as Harley Quinn, or Raven, and you're listening to Geek to Me Radio.
We are back. Talking with author Ty Singh about his book, Born to be Bad. He's interviewed so many iconic villains from the cinema. Was the focus on 80s villains, it sounds like, was that just the movies you're most familiar with? Should we expect a sequel book for 90s villains maybe coming down the pipe after a while?
Basically, what I wanted to focus on was the films that I grew up watching. So I'm 35, so I was born in 83. So a lot of the films that I grew up watching were obviously of that 80s action genre. However, there was some spillover into the 70s. So I interviewed Andrew Robinson, who played the Scorpio Killer in Dirty Harry.
Yeah.
I've always been a big fan of his. And also Bob Wall, who played O'Hara in Enter the Dragon. So I was a massive Bruce Lee fan growing up. So it was great to, interview someone who's been not just in one Bruce Lee film, but in two, because he was also in Way of the Dragon with Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee. In terms of the 90s, obviously, as we kind of get into sequels of some of the films, there were people like William Sadler, who plays Colonel Stewart in Die Hard 2, and would go on to play the Grim Reaper in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and loads of other things. And because I'm a big Star Trek fan, it was great to every now and then ask people like Andrew Robinson about playing Garak in Deep Space Nine, or William Sadler playing Colonel Stewart. Not Colonel Stewart. His character in Deep Space Nine is the head of Section 31.
Oh,
so it was great to just do little things like that, and even your bigger actors, like Ronnie Cox. Ronnie Cox was Captain Jellicoe in an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
That's right.
So I was able to kind of really let my Trek fan flag, fly while I was doing this, and even some of it didn't end up in the book. I was just able to just sit down with these actors and just go, by the way, I know we've just been talking about RoboCop and Total Recall, but I do have some Star Trek questions, and they were more than willing to sate this Star Trek fans' queries.
And Martin Kove, obviously, Mr. Sweep the Leg from Karate Kid. He came back for the third Karate Kid movie too. How was he to interview? What was it like talking to him?
He was literally the last person I interviewed for the book. So the book had to go to the publishers last December, and it got to the point where we had kind of been postponing it because he was incredibly busy. And so it was like 4 days or something before I had to submit it to the publishers that I finally got the interview, and then I had to write it all up really quickly. But we were talking about, obviously working on films like The Karate Kid and Rambo First Blood Part 2. At the time, he couldn't tell me whether he was appearing in Cobra Kai, but now that we know he showed up in the final episode of Season 1, he's going to be in Season 2. And since then, he's also had a little bit of a career resurgence, because he's going to be in Tarantino's new film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And I think Michael Jai White's trying to get him to be the villain in The Outlaw Johnny Back, which is the follow-up to Black Dynamite. So it's great that, he's getting more and more work these days. He's always working, but it's good to see him coming back more into the public consciousness. Absolutely, absolutely. And for those people who they're hearing about this now and they're like, well, I wasn't aware of this book, what is the best way for them to get it? Go to Amazon? Is there do you have a website directly for it? Yeah, so I've got a website called borntobebad.co.uk that will kind of give you like a rundown. There's some excerpts of the book on there. My publisher is an American-based publisher. They're called Bear Manor Media. You can get the book directly off their website. I'm sure they would appreciate that. But it's available on Amazon, and if you've got a local bookshop, just ask them to get it in. And basically any bookshop should be able to get it in, but you can definitely get it on Amazon. And depending, I assume you'll watch and see sales before we get a sequel, another book out for maybe, like I said, 90s into the 2000s. Is there anything in the back of your mind you're kind of planning on already? So I'm working on a documentary at the moment called In Search of the Last Action Heroes, which is all about the rise and the fall of the 80s action genre. And I'm coming out to LA next Sunday for like 10 days to interview not just some of the actors I interviewed for my book, but directors and screenwriters that were involved in a lot of these iconic films. So the idea is I might write a book based on that. I've also got a second book I'm currently writing where I can't really say much about, but it is interviewing other actors that were involved in films that are famous for maybe not the reasons that they would hope. But I've always got an idea for, Born to Be Bad Volume 2. There were so many actors that I wasn't able to speak to for the first book. It's definitely a possibility, but it all comes down to, time.
Exactly. Well, we'll look forward to, I've got to pick up this one and read it. I wasn't able to get it before I talked to you, but I may be picking it up soon. And again, if you want to check that out, borntobebad.co.uk or Bear Manor Media is that website. And we will have to have you on again once your documentary is further along. We can talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's being directed by Oliver Harper, who's a very big YouTuber who does action film retrospectives. So I'm working with him on it. And it's great. We've got a whole bunch of big names attached. He's going to be doing some interviews. I'm going to be doing some interviews. And hopefully it should be out next April is when we're hoping to kind of get the first cut all sorted by.
Perfect. That'll be a good time. We'll have you back on then, and we'll kind of see what else you've been up to at that point.
Brilliant. Sounds great.
All right, Ty Singh, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate being on air with me.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
Anytime. There he goes. Again, that website, borntobebad.co.uk or Bear Manor Media to pick that up. Hopefully we'll get those posters coming out soon, because that definitely needs to go on my wall as well. If you have just now tuned in, you missed part of the show, you can always find us. We upload this after the fact in the podcast form to Google Play, iTunes, SoundCloud, Podomatic. We're looking at getting a few other YouTube, or I'm not YouTube, but they are on YouTube as well. If you want to go to YouTube, find Geek to Me Radio. But we're looking at a few more iTunes-type outlets to put the podcast up on. And please follow me on Twitter, Instagram, at Geek to Me Radio, and of course, Facebook.com/Geek to Me Radio. We always try to bring you the coolest people to hear about their projects. My thanks again to Bret Hoffman from Marcus Theatres, to Bil Richardson from 1000 Nightmares, and to Ty Singh from Born to Be Bad. Until next week, my friends.
It's not in the way you watch I zombie. It's not in the way you watch The Flash. It's not in the way you love Scotty Young art. It's not in the way you play Mario Kart. It's not in the way you look when you make Game of Thrones references. That's a show. This is Geek to Me Radio. That's a show. This is Geek to Me Radio.
Thank you, Tranquility Base. Good night.